And so here's my question for you Twins fans, you baseball fans, that I'd love to hear back your comments on Twitter or Facebook, okay? At BDST Show for Twitter, Scotty-Ball for Facebook. But what's the worst thing that the Twins got going on right now? What's their biggest weakness, their biggest problem? What needs to get fixed the most, the fastest? What's their biggest issue? Their offense stinks, their pitching stinks, and their defense stinks. Now, in my opinion, the most necessary thing to get fixed first and foremost is, in fact, the defense, the fielding. Great pitching will be wasted if you got fielders behind you that can't still make the plays. So I mean, yes, our pitching stinks. Pitching is the most important thing in baseball, but if we got our pitching better with the crummy defense that we're putting behind our pitching, it ain't going to matter. The other teams are still going to score the runs on us. Now, you could make a case for the offense that some run support would maybe make it easier on the pitching, put the defense a little more at ease. I don't know. They all stink. They all need to get better. But if I could see one get better soon in the real near future, I would like to see the defense. I just feel like that's going to allow the most improvement over time if we fix that first, as opposed to freaking out with the bats or with the arms we got pitching for us. And then, of course, it doesn't help that you've got the Twins playing in the best division in all of baseball. The Tigers and the Royals both started out undefeated, 6-0. Tigers eventually lost. I don't know if the Royals have even lost yet. But yeah, we're by far in the toughest division. Royals, Tigers, Indians, White Sox. White Sox are struggling a little bit, but they'll come around. Boy, Chris Sale, when he was pitching against the Twins last week, whew, man, he looked every bit as good as advertised. So, but, it's all working against the Twins this year. It's going to be another long season. Well, that's what life's like if you're a baseball fan in Minnesota. So, last little baseball tidbit, Alex Rodriguez of the New York Yankees is actually playing fairly well this season. Seems like he is back. When he returned to New York Stadium here for their home opener and came out onto the field, he got a really, really nice ovation from the crowd. Seems like they have forgiven him, like okay, you did the crime, you did your time, now we can move on type of thing, and he's actually playing quite well. So, love him or hate him, you're going to have the opportunity to have an opinion on him because he is back and playing good ball. So, alright, well, I am going to have to throw out the tiny bit of WWE news. We can talk about that anytime. College basketball news, I want to say it was like 7 Kentucky underclassmen, they're freshmen, declared for the NBA draft, and the Duke Big Three freshmen, Tyus Jones, Winslow, and Okafor are in the draft too. So, got that going on. That's a little tidbit, little quickie for you. I know, not exactly baseball, but a little quickie I wanted to get in. And then in our final meet here, we'll try and keep it to about 5 minutes or so, not go too much overtime. We'll go a little bit overtime since I got the okay, like I said. But we will be talking the NFL and going over a quick part 2 of our draft preview, but some NFL news to get to before we go over our draft special part 2, and then have Ball's Deep Thought of the day. Today being April 15th, Adrian Peterson is now eligible to be considered for reinstatement. And Adrian Peterson has not been reinstated yet, but he is eligible now to be reinstated. So hopefully within the next couple days, definitely before the draft here coming up, we will have a decision on that. Now, it would not surprise me at all if Adrian Peterson was required to do A, B, C, and D things to be reinstated and by the NFL, and he's only done A and B or A, B, and C, and it'll get drug out even longer yet. That would be awful for the Vikings. They just need a decision. They're the ones getting punished more than anybody right now in the whole situation. And they just need a firm, decisive decision on the matter. Doesn't matter what it is. We just need some concrete information instead of all this wishy-washy, if he could be maybe type of stuff that's been going on with ever since the story started back in September. So there's your Adrian Peterson update. In free agent news, Michael Crabtree, wide receiver formerly of the San Francisco 49ers, signed a 1-year contract with the Oakland Raiders. So he'll definitely have an opportunity there to have a job and be a significant contributor to that team as a wide receiver. It should be interesting to see if that does affect the Oakland Raiders' first-round draft choice or not, as wide receiver was thought to be a pretty high need for them, which we'll get into here in just a minute. But that may have changed now. It might not have. It's only a 1-year contract, so hard to tell. But we got 2 NFL legal news stories here, and then like I said, I'll try and cram in the part 2 of the draft preview as quick and condensed as I can. But former NFL running back Lawrence Phillips, who was in jail, I don't remember what for, but he was serving a prison term here. He recently killed, or at least is charged with killing, his cellmate in prison. And I want to say his cellmate in prison was like the cousin of some guy who used to play for the Jaguars or something like that too. Like a really weird, NFL 6 Ways to Kevin Bacon type of, thing. But yeah, Lawrence Phillips is in prison already. He says, I don't like my cellmate. I'm going to kill him here in prison. Like, what? But anyway, so that happened in the news. Needless to say, Mr. Phillips won't be going home anytime in the near future. And then, of course, the big NFL legal news story, Aaron Hernandez was found guilty today. The jury announced their verdict that Mr. Aaron Hernandez is indeed guilty of first-degree murder of Odin Lloyd. The mandatory penalty for said crime, where he is standing trial, is life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, of course, this verdict will go to an appeal, but an appeal on something like this is a lot like trying to reverse a call in an NFL game. Like, you got to have irrefutable evidence to overturn something, otherwise we're going to go with the original call. Kind of similar like that. So, and he was also guilty on other charges, which included weapon and ammunition charges. The jury took 6 days to deliberate before they're announcing their decision. And arguably the most disturbing part of the entire story is that Mr. Hernandez is also facing trial in Boston for being involved in a double murder back in July of 2012. And that hearing is set to take place sometime later this year, so he's not even done being in murder trials. Although this one has ended, and he has been found guilty, and he will serve life in prison without the possibility of parole, barring an overturn in the appeals process. So, goodbye, Aaron Hernandez. Alright, let's squeeze in our NFL draft preview part 2 of 4 here before we got to get to our Balls Deep thought of the day and close down the show. Picking at number 1, you got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Their number 1 need is QB. However, they could go offensive line, defensive end, secondary, running back. They got some other needs too, but look for them to go quarterback. Tennessee, quarterback, offensive line, defensive line, cornerback, wide receiver. They got lots of needs. Jacksonville, wide receiver, big need. Running back, D-line, kind of. Linebacker, kind of. Secondary, kind of. You'd think they'd be better with all those kind of needs. Oakland needs a wide receiver still probably. Tight end, offensive line, D-line. They need everything. Washington, same deal. They need pretty much everything. Don't look for them to take a quarterback. And I don't like an edge rusher. I think they'd be better off with an offensive lineman or some secondary help, but they'll probably take an edge rusher. Same with the Jets, maybe some O-line, but likely an edge rusher. Possibly a QB if Mariota's still there, but I doubt it. Chicago, again, possibly QB, but I doubt it. If they're smart, they'll take a defensive lineman. However, they could look to go wide receiver to replace Brandon Marshall. Atlanta at 8, man, they need a running back, they need a tight end, they could use O-line help, and their defense stinks pretty much everywhere. So any guess is good there. The New York Giants, you're looking either O-line or defense. St. Louis, wide receiver, O-line. Not much on needs on their defense, but they could go defense. Maybe a shutdown corner like a Trey Waynes would be beneficial. But we'll get more into the players next week. Picking at 11, my Minnesota Vikings. Their needs are offensive lineman, linebacker, cornerback, and safety. One can also argue the needs for wide receiver and running back. However, those are not primary needs as far as I am concerned. Cleveland picking at 12 and 19. They need skill position. They need upgrades at skill positions. Wide receiver, tight end, running back, quarterback. Buffalo and Seattle both don't have picks in the first round, so we won't discuss their team needs as I am strictly previewing and mocking the first round of the NFL Draft. The New Orleans Saints would be the other team with 2 picks in the first round. They pick at 13 and again at 31, courtesy of the Jimmy Graham trade to Seattle. Their needs are O-line, defense, and maybe wide receiver, but I would expect them to go offensive line or defense primarily. Miami could be looking to go with a wide receiver, possibly some offensive line help. I don't buy the running back rumors that they're interested in Gurley or Gordon. They might also go defense. San Francisco, definitely expect them to go defense. They spent free agent money on wide receivers. They're sticking with Kaepernick at quarterback, at least for this year yet. They spent money on Reggie Bush at running back. They spent money at Iupata on the offensive line. They lost Willis and Borland and all kinds of people on defense. Look for the Niners to go defense. Houston doesn't have a lot of needs. They could go anyway. You name it, offense, defense. They could go anywhere. Your guess is as good as mine. San Diego, I hear they're interested in Mariota. I think Todd Gurley or Melvin Gordon at running back's more sensible. They might also go O-line or defense. Their O-line's always shady at best. Over in Kansas City, picking at 18, I think you're definitely looking at a wide receiver. However, Andy Reid might look to take one in the second or third round, and so you could see an offensive lineman or someone to help that defense out. You got Philly at 20. No chance they get Mariota. Well, it's possible Mariota could slide. You never know. But again, that's a player thing. Their needs primarily are offensive line, wide receiver, and defense. Cincinnati doesn't have a whole lot of needs. Pittsburgh has needs on defense, especially in the secondary with Ike Taylor retiring and Troy Polamalu retiring, and their linebacker Jason Worrell's retiring. They got to go defensive side of the ball for sure in Pittsburgh. Detroit could use a running back, losing Bush, only having Jack Bell. They could also go defense, either D-line or secondary. Arizona Cardinals may go running back. However, I think they'd be better suited going on the defensive side of the ball. They lost Arnold Dockett, and I think talent, even though they were a very successful defense last year, I think they lost a lot of pieces and overachieved and need more talent on defense. So that's where I would go if I was the Cardinals. However, a lot of running back talk there too. Carolina, they will go offensive line first round, almost no doubt about it. Baltimore Ravens should definitely go wide receiver, maybe offensive line, possibly some D-line, but definitely thinking wide receiver for the Ravens. Dallas, I think they should go defensive line, maybe linebacker, or maybe running back. I'm thinking D-line though. Broncos, you got to be thinking offensive line, maybe defensive line, but mostly offensive line. The Colts, not a lot of needs. That's kind of a luxury pick. I'd go defense there as their offense is scarier than their defense. And then finally you got the Packers, who will almost for sure go defense, some sort of lineman or pass rusher. And the Patriots, who will almost for sure try to replace Brandon Browner and Darrelle Revis, who they both lost in the offseason, and will trade up from 32 or stay pat at 32 and take a defensive back. All right, so that's part 2 of your 4-part draft preview, and we got to wrap up the show. Let's get to Balls Deep Thought of the Day. All right, my Balls Deep Thought of the Day is this. It goes back to the Balls on Fire segment on the Masters. Okay, that's what we're going to do for the Deep Thought of the Day. Here's my Deep Thought of the Day. Can we please have a pro golfer at one of these big tournaments where the crowd is sitting there in the fairway? You know how many times I've seen a guy at the Masters this last weekend just barely missed the fairway by a foot or two, and he's hitting people in chairs who are parked right there in the second cut? because you can't call it the rough because it's the Masters. It's the rough. But they're right there in the second cut, right off of the fairway. It's like, what are you doing there? Let them play. Can we not have the Masters set up where the fans are farther away from the actual area of play? Give the